Hello, friends. Welcome to the show. Today, I am thrilled to welcome my guest, Khara Williams. Khara is a former banking executive, so you guys all know that I love people who've worked in banking. I think we've all got some great war stories to share. Khara, known for her strategic acumen, people-first leadership, and has really built a respected relationship and reputation in the banking world. But behind that success came a turning point, and after facing burnout and questioning really what achievement is and what success is, Khara made the bold decision to sell everything and move to Abu Dhabi, which I'm so excited to hear about as well. Now, through her new venture, Khara's helping women redefine success on their own terms, and she's also starting a podcast, which I can't wait to hear about. Welcome to the show, Khara.
Thank you so much for having me, Ange. It's a privilege to be here today.
I'm looking forward to chatting with you. Now, you built a really admirable career in banking. It's something that takes a long time to establish, and it often is connected to our identity when we build a career like that. What led you to walk away from a career that you'd spent so much time and energy building?
Mm, It's a great question. I think that there was a tap on my shoulder for a very long time, probably 6 months prior to actually having my first child, Jed, who is 11 next month. And it's been something quietly sitting there because at the end of the day, and I'm a creative at heart,
Mm,
and I was trying to fit into this box in the corporate world where I didn't feel that I was seen or heard for what I truly was as a soul. And so that quiet tap whispering there has been for a really long time. And it's
mm.
taken me a lot of time to be able to reflect and go through some burnout, go through some challenging personal times as well, where I've had to start looking at what does that next chapter look like for me? And
Mm.
because I've become a mother through that time as well, it's been an evolution for me.
Yeah. And how did you make the decision to take that step? Because I think a lot of people can probably resonate with sort of feeling that tap. They might be working in a corporate job or in a job where they're feeling it, but then I guess the rational brain takes over and they think, well,
Mm.
I've spent all this time building a career. I've got, a life that I've got to pay for. How did you make the decision, or was there a pivotal point where you were able to make that decision to resign or leave?
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest pivotal shift for me was prob 5 years ago. I was sitting with my husband, Scott, and I just said, I would love to be able to work abroad. But even prior to that, there was an opportunity that came up where my husband was an ex serving military personnel in Australia, and he was going over to the States. And I got this opportunity to go to London and work for an organization that I was working for at the time. And there was this pivotal moment where I knew that I wanted to go abroad. I knew that I wanted to go internationally, but I just didn't know what that looked like. And so for the last
Mm,
5 years, Scott and I have been really working through, well, what is that? What does that look like? So we started to, without actually knowing, we started to liquidate our assets in Australia. We started to minimize our household by, reducing what we had in it especially over our last move to Canberra from Perth. And it was the defining point that my husband got an opportunity in July last year to move to Abu Dhabi. In my mind, I knew that I would potentially come over here and want to work full time in the corporate world, but
mm.
in the banking system here. But since being here, it actually forced me to think quite differently. And so I almost feel, and in a way, that if I was still in Australia currently right now, I probably would be somewhat still in the role that I'm in. I would be, working,
Mm.
traveling the country and consistently really just working behind scene on my passion, but not actually having to be stepped into it. And so I've come to Abu Dhabi, moved here, and now I'm in two worlds where you're pulled, and energetically you're being pulled to one side, but energetically you're being pulled to the corporate side from a monetary perspective, because I've
Yeah.
always been our primary income earner in our household. So for me, as a responsibility to build that for our house and for our children has been really a challenge for me to be able to overcome.
Mm.
So yeah, it's been a forced move, I would say, for me personally at the moment, in a
Yeah, and
good
I think
way.
sometimes that yeah, and sometimes that happens, doesn't it? You know, like the environment will
Yeah.
force a move and then we realize, well, actually, it was the best thing for us. How have you gone with uncoupling your identity from being banking executive, from being the breadwinner to settling in, going with it and seeing what comes and building your own thing?
Mm. Well, it's been interesting. I'm nearly 6 months into living here, and I am currently, in the whole phase of being a mum, and I've never had the opportunity in my life to just be with my boys as much as I have right now.
Mm,
I agree. The grief, and for me leaving my most recent role, I didn't think that I would feel that much grief. For the first 6 to 8 weeks of being here, I would wake up some days going, just want to talk to my team. I just want to talk to
mm,
those people's voices that I feel familiar all the time. So the grief, I've grieved it because I actually finished work on the Friday in Australia, and it was end of financial year. So trying to get everything set up and moving into the next bank here, um, for the 1st of July. I literally was on a plane on the Sunday night. So I actually had no
oh my God.
downtime to be able to just feel the feels of actually we're moving.
Yeah.
And, throughout that whole process, I was doing the whole move, setting up everything, making sure that everything was, you know, sold, talking to Telstra, talking to all the things that you think, gosh, everything that you've got to finalize in Australia to then come over here. And so the grieving process for me, yeah, I didn't feel that I would feel that so much, but it has definitely brought
Mm,
up a lot of health challenges since being here, which I didn't think that I had. We all deal with grief differently, but this one hit me a little bit harder because I knew that it was an absolute ending of my life and a new beginning into
mm.
something completely different of the unknown, which I didn't know, or still to this day, in some capacities, still don't know. And I have to just energetically feel that daily to then know what's today going to look like. It's very different, very very different. But my main priorities
Mm.
is the alarm going off at 6 a.m., getting our boys up to be on their school bus by 6:30 a.m., and then I walk back up and get myself organised and back at my laptop, and the day just looks completely different to what it ever did.
How are you, uh, I guess, processing that? So do you have some tools that you're doing every day? You know, something I love is like a morning pages, or are there things that you're doing to help you continue to process that? Because I think it does take a long time. I think it took me
Mhm.
12, if not 18 months from leaving banking to stop saying, oh, I used to work in the bank. You know, I used to do this. It's sort of an understory now,
Yeah.
but it takes a long time. What are you doing to help yourself sort of overcome and grieve, the corporate Cara
Process.
to be able to go into this next
Yeah.
chapter?
Yeah. I think the first thing has been the most important thing for me is just pure kindness to myself and allowing me
Mm,
to feel all the different emotions that come up and actually sitting in them and feeling totally okay with them. In the past, you would have just
mm,
brushed them under the table and you would have just let them go on through. Today I sit here and in the mornings, I obviously in first up I'm doing dealing with the children, but when the boys are on the school bus and I'm back up here, I literally just sit for 10 minutes and I'm looking over at where I sit now, and the sun coming through, and the sun's rising, and the sun rising here is just so spectacular. It is like this orange pink color, and I just sit there and I literally have just gratitude moments. So I do my own prayer.
mm,
I pray to, myself. I pray to, it's my gratitude process. And sometimes I could sit there for 10 minutes. Sometimes I could sit there for 20 minutes. Sometimes I could just start crying. Sometimes I just allow myself
mm,
the stillness to be able to feel everything that comes in. But so much gratitude for the stillness that my mind now has. It's quite empty. And there's something about an empty
mm.
mind that is spectacular, and not having to have these responsibilities of, where am I going next or what am I doing? My other daily practice, which has been slowed down at most recent time because I've been injured, but is my Mozart time. And my Mozart time is still time when I walk. So I'm a fundamental believer of
Mm,
daily walks, and I've been doing that consistently since June 2022. I used to do it around the Canberra Lake in Australia, but now I get to do it here. And unfortunately, when I first got here, majority of you will know it's the hottest time of the year in the UAE.
yeah.
So I had to do it on a treadmill. But you know what? I still found my groove in doing it on the treadmill. Now the weather has become spectacular and now I can be outdoors. So the other
Mm,
start, I just literally started again this week because I've had the okay from my specialist to do so. And the weather's so glorious is I sit there and then I get up and I go for my walk. And my walk would be 15 minutes just this week, but it's usually a lot longer than that. I always give myself an hour. I try not to listen to podcasts. I don't have my phone on me.
mm,
It is literally still time. And that has been transformational for me to not allow to have anything in my ears or stimulating me from a mental perspective. It's just sitting in pure stillness. And I call it Mozart time. I had a fantastic leader that taught me Mozart time years and years and years ago, and it's stuck with me.
mm. Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And I think stillness and silence are two of the biggest superpowers for creativity, for performance, for wellness, for mental health. And I think our worlds are not set up to allow us to do it. And we have to really try exceptionally hard to make an effort to do it. And similarly to you, I call them my CEO walks. I walk silent, nothing in my ears most of the time,
Mm,
or sometimes I'll just have my earphones plugged in, but with nothing in them, just to block out too much noise.
wow.
And I find you're the most creative. You realize maybe why you've reacted to something the way you've reacted to it. It really allows you that sort of time
Yeah.
to just be and be in motion. So I love those tips. When you think about banking and the corporate sector, it thrives on performance, right? Like everything is about
Mm.
performance, squeezing more out from individuals, from money. How did you navigate the tension between that high achieving, high performance and being healthy? Or did you? Because I know I didn't do it well, and that's why I sort of burnt out and ended up with panic attacks. And I thought I was doing well.
Mm.
But how did you navigate that tension?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question because I think you evolve and grow over time. So when I first started out
Mm.
in a really large leadership role, I did nothing. You know, I think about that
Mm.
time and I was like on a Sunday night looking at the results. Sunday night, when you've got to get up and prepare and ready
Yep.
for Monday morning and explain the reasons why you haven't hit your home loan KPI for the week and you're now sitting at this year to date number, et cetera, right? And you sit there and you go, like, that is so not okay for your health and well-being to do so. And one of the biggest
Mm.
shifts that I made, and I remember, and the most another amazing leader that I had, this time a female, and she would say to me, she never ever looks at data and outcomes on a Sunday evening because she never can then sleep
Mm.
that night to then get prepped and ready for the week ahead,
Yeah.
right? Which is where you Monday is a refresh. You get to reset the tone for the week. And when she said that to me, she was the general manager at the time. It gave me
Mm.
permission to go, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Why am I doing that? So, by that one little
Mm.
comment that she doesn't do it, she never told me not to do it. But when she gives herself permission to do so, it gave me the permission not to do that anymore. And so, there's those tiny
Yeah.
little things that supported me through the journey. Obviously, the evolution as you grow more into your career. I've always been a person that's eaten really well. I've just always been like
Mm.
that. I take pride in how I show up, in what I put into my body. I'm not a big drinker. I'm not a big drinker at all. So for me personally, they were the key things that I knew for optimal health, optimal performance, that I knew that I needed to not be like on point with all the time. The other things that I would
Yeah.
say is you evolve, and meditation became a really big process for me, and taking the time out. And so I would always implement
Mm.
walk and talk meetings. Why do I need to be sitting at a laptop? Why do I need to be sitting at my computer? I'd talk to one of my leaders. I'd say, "Come on, let's go out. Let's get out." And, I'd be wearing heels, right? As we do. But it
Yeah.
didn't matter. It was about getting out into the nature.
Yeah.
It was getting and majority of the time you're in, capital cities. So you're in the city, but how beautiful our cities in Australia with all the trees. There's still
Mm,
so much around. And so being out in nature and taking those micro little
mm.
moments throughout your day, it has been vital. I've never ever been a lunch breaker. I've always just had my lunch, my salad at my desk, but I always took myself out still for a 5, 10, 15-minute walk throughout the day to reset. And that was pivotal for me, really, really pivotal.
Yeah. Yeah, those are great tips. And I think so important. I resonate a lot with that. I always ate healthy and I'm similar, not a big drinker at
Yeah.
all. I was just probably doing the wrong exercise, overdoing it. I probably needed more yoga and less high intensity interval training, I reckon, when I was in that
Yeah.
corporate space. But I
You
think getting
definitely
outside, getting some fresh air.
Yeah. And, like, I've definitely not done it well, like, in so many different stages of your career, right? You'd be up so early in the
Mm,
morning, you'd be at the office at, like, 6:30, 7 o'clock. Why? I
yeah,
did that because I wanted to be seen that I was proving myself to be something. And obviously back then, from a Michael Black type of leadership, you would literally feel that that's the only way, and especially a male dominant world, that was the only way that you felt that
yeah.
you could be seen is that you had to work as many hours as, all these people. And you're totally not productive. I am the most
No, because
productive
you're
early in the morning
exhausted.
for the first 2 to 3 hours. I've done majority of my work for the whole day.
Yeah.
That's it. So it's,
You're like me. We're
yes,
the
it's
same. We work on the
interesting.
same schedule.
Yeah. I'm like mornings, I could work, 12 hours for the
Yeah.
day, but I've actually been the most productive in the morning in silence with no one in the office. And then, in the afternoon, it's like, you're doing your thing, but at the same time, it's like you're not as productive.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny, I look back and I think now that I look back and I'm outside of that construct, I actually think the people who are sitting there longer, I'm wondering, do they need some development or skill development? Why is it taking them so long? Like, you shouldn't need to be here. And in fact, if I saw people here less and they're still getting their results, I'd be like, great. You're obviously super
Yeah.
productive, but when you're in it, it's very hard to see, I think, the wood from the trees. And you think that visibility is actually really, really important.
It's the visibility part, I think, because
Mm.
it doesn't, and I
Yeah.
think COVID potentially has shifted that a little bit, but the
Mm,
visibility of being in a physical building where everyone can see you. And don't get me wrong, even as a
mm,
leader, and I'm sure that you had this through your journey as well, is that if you didn't see some people in the office sometimes, you'd be like, what are they doing? Where are they? What are they
yeah.
up to? Like, as in, especially if they were not performing, right? And so
Correct.
it
Yes.
definitely
Yeah.
is that visibility perspective. Mm,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And I think particularly like you said, if they're not performing, it makes total sense. I want to know for you now that you're sort of obviously out of this corporate world, what has, I guess, recovery and recalibration looked like for you in terms of how you're investing in yourself, your health? Health is really the basis of our success. So what has that process looked like for you?
mm. So obviously, my walks are obviously the biggest one for me. But can I say the most biggest one lately since being here is sleep. Sleep.
Mm.
I am the best day sleeper since not being
Ah.
in work. And honestly, and when I say that, when I was in corporate and under pressure, I would always have a nap on the weekends. It's just the way that my coping
Mm.
mechanism is to deal with stress, right? My body is just like that. I need to have sleep. Everybody needs to have sleep. But what I will say to you since being here, it has been one of the biggest things is I did not realize how much actually I was drained and burned out that I actually needed to give myself the space to just be able to have sleeps. Now, I'm not saying that I sleep every single day, but when I actually literally
Mm.
cannot keep my eyes open in the afternoon, I will give myself the permission to go and have a sleep. And it has
Mm.
been so powerful for me personally because I'm starting to feel more alive again now and starting to feel human,
Yeah.
where before I was just in fight mode all the time. My cortisol levels were so high. Now I'm starting to go, okay, 6 months in, starting to feel like, wow, I've got some more energy. And you don't actually really realize how much you don't when you're in the day to day grind every single day in the corporate field or working just in general. Now I've had that space,
Yeah.
I've been able to give myself the permission to do so. Obviously, I'm always eating clean. One of the things that I have actually implemented, which I find is, it's a luxury really because it's not a free thing to do is I go down to the sauna here at the hotel. We live in the hotel residence,
Mm.
and the sauna here has been magical as well. Like going into the sauna, having that time out. I do it twice a week. And that's also been really lovely process for me because once again, you don't take your phone in, you don't have earphones in, you don't have anything. You just literally lay there and, you know, meditate in some form. And that's been really powerful for me. And
Mm.
reading. So just doing lots of reading and it's been magical.
Yeah. I love that. And I have to say, I resonate so much with you saying how when you stopped, you slept. So when I left corporate and I was studying, I would have naps almost every afternoon. And if my husband was working from home, he'd come in, I'd be like, I'm not being lazy. And he's like, are you kidding? If I could have a nap right now, I'd have a nap. Yeah. But I felt exactly the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. You just don't realize that's and that's been my biggest like I'm sitting here as I'm talking to you. I that has been my biggest thing since moving out here. No idea how wind up I was
Mm.
in my old
Yeah.
life. And I say my new life, my old
Yeah.
life, even though I'm like, in the same life, you know what I mean? But that has been the
Yeah.
most and so for me now, it's like, how do we create this space like what you're doing, with your wellness piece as well, is we've somehow got to find a way that you can do this stuff even when you are in the corporate world and or working all the time as well. There's got to be this balance. I don't know what the answers are to that yet, but we've got to be able to find this balance because the way we live today is unattainable. You cannot have any forms of longevity around it. And it's actually quite scary to think I've got two boys in this world that are growing up, and the difference between our household right now with me not working in corporate and being home
Mm.
to be with my children and for my husband, the dynamic from a feminine masculine energy perspective and how much smoother and happier and calm the household is, there is something to be said about that.
There are so many things that we can do to try and shift it. And then I think it also needs to be shifted at a system level as well. Like organizations
Absolutely.
need to support it as much as individuals need to. And I think it's a two-prong approach, right? As individuals, we need to take accountability, but we also need to be in a system that allows us to be able to create the space to look after our well-being. Because the research
Yeah,
shows like when we're well, we perform better. But we've got this old
absolutely.
construct of hustle, and the harder we work and the more we're there, the better we do. But that's not actually the truth. And there's an expiry date on that type of performance. You can't do it forever.
Yeah. And I think that we are in, it'd be interesting to know your thoughts. I think that we're in this space in life right now where we've got people still in executive high roles that are coming to the end of their careers and they
Mm,
know the old way of that hustle, that day to day grind, that way. And that's okay. But the silver lining in all of that is the importance of actually being adaptable to change. And I think that
yeah.
still in a lot of corporate settings, leadership hasn't adapted to the speed of what the new generations look and feel like today. And that's
Yep.
the downfall. But I feel like we're right in that mix of the shift happening and people
Mm,
becoming more aware that they do need to be agile and need to think differently, especially for the generations that are coming through now. They're not going to stand for it. They're just not going to. And the burnout factor is really, really real.
yep. Yeah, and I think it's interesting because this generation coming through, I mean, we've got, I think it's 5 generations in the workforce at the moment. So,
Mhm.
huge differences in the way people work. And this generation coming in have seen their parents hustle. They've seen what it's done to their well-being, and they've also seen mass redundancies in their parents, no matter how
Oh,
hard they worked. I heard Simon Sinek talking about it, and he said, you know, this generation, they're not necessarily entitled, but they've seen what happens when someone gives everything to an organization and then that organization will still make them redundant. So they're saying, well, hold on, you show us that you value us and we'll show you what we can work, but it's not going to be a master servant relationship anymore from the organization down. And I thought that was a really
absolutely.
interesting take.
Yeah, no, he's fantastic, and I totally agree with what his your sentiment is on that because, um, it and I think that is one thing that I would say to you. One of the first roles that I ever had is my one of my first bosses said to me, and this hit me hard because my integrity and values are so strong, like so strong.
Mm,
I'm very big with them. She said, "Cara, you're just a number. You're just a number." And I that one line has stuck with me for my whole career. Every single
mm,
person is replaceable. When she said that to
yeah.
me, I must admit I was taken back because I was like, "No, like, I am not replaceable. I am Kara Schwartz at the time. I am
Yeah.
absolutely, doing my thing. I'm powerful. I'm this, I'm that." And I'm just sitting there going, "Of course we're not." But I think the biggest thing, and is then over time, as you mature, you evolve, you grow, you actually really see that that is actually the truth. And
Mm,
that does never means that you have to
yep.
treat your people or anything like that. I've been in the position where I've had to make
No.
so many
Mm,
people redundant in my career, and it's been horrendous to do so. And geez, that was the hardest, one of the hardest parts of my career is that, right? And yeah, it's an interesting
mm,
space that we're in right now around the generations, to your point, around 5 different generations, but we
mm,
have to adapt. We have to be moved with times. And our conversation earlier around seeing people's views, you may not agree with them, but seeing them and understanding their thoughts around it is actually really important for somebody that is coming later. I'm in the middle of, my career. I've got, 15, 20 years left really if I was to stay in the
mm.
corporate world. And you have to shift and adapt and see different views
Yeah.
for us to actually grow in
Yeah.
business today as well and be sustainable.
For sh- For sure. And I think, on that, we were talking before we started recording about, things that seem very binary. If I believe this, then you can't believe that. Right. And I think it's just about,
Exactly.
listening and being curious and thinking, okay, that's your experience. That's interesting. I can see where you're coming from and this is mine. And we might not think
Mm,
the same, but if we're in the same organization or team, we need to find a way to sort of agree on some sort of playing field where we feel that there's a level of value or integrity so that we can move forward, even if we're going to move forward in different ways. So I think that's
mm,
super, super
mm,
important.
mm,
I want to talk a little bit about your move to Abu Dhabi because it's very different, obviously, to Australia. And you were saying how you have sold everything and moved over there and living in a hotel at the moment. I'd love to know your thoughts on what it feels like to have less attachment to stuff. And do you feel like it's been freeing? Do you feel like it's been confronting? Both. I just, it's an interesting topic. And I think sometimes we can get so caught up in chasing stuff. So how have you found the process of
mm,
shedding the stuff
mm.
and moving over there?
Shedding, I've been, like I said earlier, around on this process for a few years now, knowing that there's going to be something greater. But we didn't know what, when I say greater, it could be anywhere or doing anything you want to do. For us, it was like just
Mm,
trusting that there was going to be something greater out there because we knew that what we were doing, getting up, going to work every day, actually was just not going to serve our lifestyle any longer. And we are very much the four amigos, us four. We've always been the four of
mm,
us traveling around Australia. I did 9 moves in 12 years with my husband and in Australia. So for
mm,
us, the actual moving part actually hasn't been as such hard per se. What I would say though is packing up everything I thought that maybe I would miss my family more, but we have been away from our immediate family for so long, and they live in South Australia or in
Yeah.
Western Australia, and so we've been away for such a long time that for us leaving Canberra was we didn't have anyone there. So that part of it was
Mm.
actually okay. I think the biggest things for me
Yeah.
now as being a mum, I can, shift and go anywhere in the world, but being a mum to two boys that love their cousins and their grandparents, that was the hardest. That has been the hardest point for them. Also, my boys,
Mm.
I would class them as little bush boys. They love being
Yeah.
outdoors. They love playing with sticks. They love being at the lake. They are just such outdoor children. We definitely haven't been a family with devices and that. And Scott and I have really shielded that for such a long time with our children. They've only just got their first device since moving to Abu Dhabi, to be honest. And so we've always
Mm.
been this outdoor family. So the biggest shift for me has been how do we bring that life over here and the balance that we're giving the children now, it is very different. And so there's elements of me that wishes that simplifying life is it is very simple here. We definitely have simplified everything, but being together
Mm.
has been the most important thing. Clearly I'm working from home at the moment. My husband is, up early in the morning, but he's home by 3:30 every day, which means that he's got
Mm.
this space now to be with our children that he never had previously. And he finishes work by 11 o'clock on Fridays. And so his actual day to day life has been magical to see him. No laptops, no phones are allowed at home. So, from a mental well-being perspective,
Wow.
has been amazing for him to then spend all this time with our boys, and that's obviously due to security reasons, but he
Yeah.
can't bring work home. He's not allowed to. And so we
Mm.
knew that that was the lifestyle out here, and we knew that that's a lifestyle that we actually wanted because we were not people say that they're always with their children, but there's a big difference between your child sitting with you and you being present. And being present is completely
Mm.
different to them just being in the house and being with them and taking them to the movies or taking them out doing this. You're actually not present with them. And so we've now got this
Mm.
space of just being present consistently with each other, which that brings that stillness, that brings this whole different realm of our life. And so our quality of life, there's no comparison to what we had
Oh,
in Australia.
wow. I think that's so important to hear because you think of going to somewhere like the Emirates and you think, hustle and bustle. And we've obviously got our quality of life in terms of our nature we were talking about earlier and our beaches and all of that sort of thing. But the ability to have true connection and presence and talking about
Mm,
that as quality of life, I think how powerful
yeah.
because I do think we live in such a distracted time and, to be able to put boundaries around things like, I mean, lucky from the security perspective that your husband can't bring his laptop and phone home, like that's amazing.
Mhm.
But it also does go to show how important of a signal that is from a family perspective that like, hey, no, when I'm at home,
Mm.
it is family time. It's not,
Yeah.
I'm distracted by work or I'm distracted by this. And I actually say a lot that I don't believe in work-life balance, i.e. doing work while you're, at your kid's soccer match. I believe in work-life separation if you can do it. And that's wherever you're at, be there 100% rather than half-half. Because for me, I don't feel like I do anything well when I'm trying to do half-half.
No. And I think that that's around if you generally have conversations with people, they'll say they do that. But realistically, in action and what they're demonstrating when you see them around you, they're actually not doing that. And I think the most important
Mm.
thing here is that it's being present, but you have to be consciously aware of it all the time. If you want to shift and change,
Mm.
as you would know with mindset and rewiring your brain, you have to sit in a conscious space all the time, which is tiring, right? Because you're
Yeah.
constantly wanting to show up in a conscious state
Yeah.
where you're like, right, I'm very conscious of this conversation that I'm having right now. But 95% of the
Mm.
time, we're sitting in subconscious, right? And that
Yeah.
is, we're just going with the motions of life. And so many
Mm.
people are just missing out on life, like life, and this is the thing that I just wish so many more people could experience that we don't need to, you don't need to move to Abu Dhabi to live life
Yeah.
or to,
Yeah.
have better quality. It's, we've done that just because we wanted to explore the world more, right? But everyone's different. But it's about being
Mm.
conscious and making conscious micro little moves in your life where you can implement different things. And I think more and more people are doing it, but I still think we've got a long way to come.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's, our brains are lazy, right? They're very energy hungry. And I think the reason we're in our subconscious so much is
Conditioned.
because it's easier for the brain to be there. Like you don't have to work as hard, but you can
Mm,
create new neural pathways, even just through visualization.
exactly.
It's been shown. And so I think, we can work a little harder to fully be present, like you said, and not be in that subconscious. And I love that you even brought that up and talked about it because I think, if we had been talking about this 5 years ago, Cara, people would have thought we were just
Mm,
complete woo-woo whack jobs. And there's so much
I
research
know.
to support the power of mindset and presence and neuroplasticity
Mm,
and even things like visualization in really wanting to connect with the type of life you want to live as well. And I love that you talk about
mm,
how
mm,
intentional you guys have been in the type of life you want to live because sometimes I
mm.
think it's easy, particularly when you work in a business or corporate environment, to get caught in the groundswell and just be taken along the ride of where you think you should go, but actually pausing and stopping and saying, what is my version of a rich life? And that doesn't mean financially. That just means what is a enriching life for me? And I love that you talk about that intentionality.
I think that that's probably one of the biggest things that I see, even from a leadership perspective, is so many people go when they're doing performance reviews and just reviews in general, talk to me about, so many leaders say, well, what role do you want to go into? It's not actually about the role or the title. It's
Mm,
actually about what feels good from an integrity and values perspective and where your skills are, or actually where you want to move within learning. Because it's not always about the skills that
yeah.
you've already got, but it's actually about learning new skills, which is about that rewiring of the brain. And it's just an interesting phase of life that I find myself in at the moment from a leadership perspective as well, which is really around that self leading and around what that looks like. And so many
Mm,
people just look outside externally and they're not looking internally. And so many people can't lead themselves. Like it all starts with
yeah.
self. So, yeah, it's an interesting
Ah,
phase. Mm.
100%. I couldn't agree more. I really believe it starts with self. And I do believe so much in self efficacy and self leadership and understanding
Absolutely.
ourselves a little bit better. And I think that's a really nice lead in to talk a little bit more about what you're building. So I'd love to hear
Mm.
more about it. What's the philosophy and what's it going to look like?
Yeah. So Herd is really close to my heart. It's a company that's being built currently at the moment that will be launched in January next year. Herd was created 7 years ago, so it's been an evolution for me personally. But I've pivoted throughout that time, and
Mm,
those pivots have been really big for me because that's actually been a part of my developmental stages and my seasons of life. And deeply understanding and going on the journey to really understand who I am on, in this world and going deep with self leadership. But Herd really is a bold response to an unmet need in the global media women's market. Um, Women in the messy middle, in the reinvention of who they are and what they want in their lives. And I believe that women go through so many different seasons. It's not about a season of motherhood or a season of, working in corporate or a season of a portfolio career or, you know, leaving school. I believe that every single human goes through multiple different seasons throughout their life.
mm,
And it's about leading yourself through all of those different seasons. So Herd has been created as a space where the first part to Herd is a release of a podcast that's coming in January, and I talk about a framework that I believe that every single female needs to be able to self lead. This is not through strategy, this is through lived experience and the things that I've seen through
mm,
my leadership journey that I believe every single, males need it too, but obviously I'm female. I want to talk to the females of the world. And so it's all around your career, It's about what does that look like? Now, your career could look so differently in so many different facets. Doesn't mean climbing a corporate ladder. It means that you can just
Mm,
be where you are and be totally happy with who you are as a soul and give and do amazing work in that space. It also means that you don't ever have to be a leader of leading people. I've come from leadership roles because that's what I wanted to do, but it doesn't mean that every single woman in the world wants to lead teams. So
yeah.
career can be in so many different ways and so many as an umbrella leadership. And from a career perspective, there's so many things that come underneath that. And so there'll be experts coming onto the podcast that will talk through what that could look like. The biggest realization for me as the second pillar was relationship. So, relationship with self, relationship with your spouse or your husband, your wife, your relationships with your family, your relationships with working, but like just working relationships and
Mm,
relationships in all facets of your life. And to be honest with you, I believe that that one is a real big one. Relationship with yourself to deeply understand who you are, to be able to then show up in relationships and be a better version of yourself is extremely important. We
mm,
obviously, from a banking perspective, money, it's around how do we, not about, you know, hustling to get more money. It's not about, doing all of these crazy things to be a millionaire. It's actually about just authentically understanding how money works for you and around what your values are and how you want to work
mm.
backwards in your life, not frontwards. And so that's a
Yeah.
really important factor. And then life, which is all around the self care component. So Pilates, which you know about, yoga, um, how we show up and eat daily, sitting down and just reading, meditating, having a lemon ginger tea, if that's the way that whatever your that looks like from a life perspective, that could be travel, but each individual will have a different way of looking at their life and around what that pillar looks like. So those four key pillars underpin Herd on all facets, and it's about supporting women to be seen and heard, but in their own unique way. That's authentic to
Mm.
themselves and leading themselves first, and then going out into the world and being able to show up in the best way that they can for themselves and people around them.
Oh, I love that because it's all about, I think everything that we've really spoken to today, Cara, is all about that intentionality and self leadership. Like that's really
Mm,
been an undertone of
mm,
so much of it. And I think, you know, being intentional in the way that we live, it sounds like Herd's really going to help women to be able to do that in whatever season it is, but really crafting a life that feels great for them, us, in our
mm,
values, in our authenticity, not a life that TikTok or Instagram or, a
mm,
magazine says is what is successful, right? It's what success
mm.
to each individual.
And I think that that's the most, we know, and that the whole world is saturated on education, on all the different things that you can do. I was literally just having a conversation with someone the other day around, even from a wellness perspective, as you know, so much out there around red light therapy, do this, take this G1,
Mm,
like do all of these, creatine, all these things, right? And we're just becoming crippled with decision making
yeah.
around what actually is serving you. And I actually sometimes think that it's gone too far now where actually people are probably having anxiety around jitters. Like, if I don't do this, am I actually going to live until I'm 90 or 85?
Yeah.
Am I going to have a long
Yeah.
life? And so I feel like we've just never got this middle ground that just feels like
Yeah.
we're just in tune with who we are. And so Herd is a space of education, but an education of all different things. It's not about
Mm.
you should do this or you need to do this. It's actually about just giving you the tools to take on board. And if that's 5%, 10%, 1%, something that you've taken away for you to propel yourself further in life and self lead yourself, well, that's a win. That's all that I can ask
Yep.
for as a founder and as the evolution of Herd grows. And, that's Herd was fundamentally built because as a child, I never felt like I was heard, right? And so,
Mm.
I grew up, I'm 40 now, and I grew up in a beautiful, loving, caring family. But my parents were business owners and the hustle was real. My parents were never really around, or my mum, when she was coming to pick us up, she was racing in. She'd quickly a 2-minute shower, quickly get
Mm,
us back out. I have 3 sisters. And so that hustle life. And so Herd was created on this foundation that back in the day, you might have heard the saying that a lot of parents would just say, you're seen, but you're not heard, right? Go sit over there. You
yeah.
don't need to be, you're seen, but you're just not heard. And even though they never said those things outwardly, that's just how I felt. And so I always felt
Mm,
that I had to prove myself through my younger life, e.g., getting up before going to school in high school and going and doing laps at the pool, or doing my first aid course, or doing like this all stuff that I was doing when I was 13, 15, 16, because I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be
mm,
heard. And now going through my evolution of actually, you don't need to be heard from a place of masculine energy, or, I'm going to be
mm.
this and flying a kite for all women. It's actually a place of just being heard in your own unique way. And that's how
Yeah.
Herd has been created, is for women to be in a safe space globally all around the world where they can feel that they've got tangible education, tangible products, tangible information they can take away and implement into their life on a different level than what's currently out there in the media, currently out there in all the different platforms. So it's an evolution. There is definitely more strategy to it now than, Herd wasn't built on strategy first. It was built on
Yeah.
the lived experience. And the most powerful
Mm.
thing we can do is to lead yourself with clarity and kindness. And that's because that's where, every other kind of leadership really begins. And that's where Herd's
Mm.
been created from.
What a wonderful offering, and I can't wait for you to launch it next year. And I think it also talks to, you say clarity and kindness, but I think also encourages curiosity, for yourself around not just doing it because, like you said, this person said to do this or this person said to do that, but just being curious about yourself and what you need as an individual, not what everyone else is saying that you should be doing. I'd
I
love to
know.
finish
Yeah.
with a final question because we talk a lot about learning and lots of information out there, but I'd love to know, what's one thing that you're currently unlearning in this new season of your life?
Oh, that's such a good question. What am I unlearning in this? Unlearning the belief that for me to be of value to the world is in the corporate setting.
Yeah, that's a big one, isn't it? That your value is in the corporate setting,
So
that
to
actually you have so much value
Yeah,
as an individual and outside of that.
yeah, and to your point earlier around when you left, it's this identity that, yes, that
Mm,
was who I was, and I'm still in that middle age of unlearning that. When I do talk to people here that I'm meeting around, who am I? What does that look like?
mm.
And it's quite interesting around the unlearn, because it's been such a identity for you for such a long time. So I'm unlearning that identity to recreate the new identity to go into the next chapter of my life.
What an important place to be in too, and to really, I
So,
admire that you're really allowing yourself the time to do that as well, because it can get uncomfortable, and that discomfort can sometimes want to make us jump back into something or to not take
yeah,
that time. So I really admire that you are sharing the
yeah.
intentionality, the stillness and the time that you're giving yourself. And I think all of us could learn from that for sure. So thank you so much for your time today, Cara. I've
Thank
loved
you.
chatting with you, and I feel like there's so many pearls of wisdom for so many of the listeners out there. I really appreciate it. Thanks for joining me on Work and Wellness. If today's episode resonated with you, remember, someone in your network might need to hear this too. Share it with a colleague or friend who could use these insights. I'd love to keep the conversation going, so find us on Instagram at Mind Your Grit, where we share daily tips and continue these discussions. And if you found value in today's episode, please take time to rate and review the show. It makes such a huge difference and helps other people discover conversations they might really need. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Each week, we're building a community of people who believe that success and well-being go hand in hand. You can find the notes, resources, and links from today's episode at mindyourgrit.com. This is Work and Wellness with Ange Davis. Your work matters, your wellness matters, and this is where it all comes together. See you next week.